Hi, I'm Kim, and I bought the cheapest sewing machine at Walmart in an effort to show you that you do not have to spend a lot of money in order to start sewing. So I'm going to do an unboxing of this Brother sewing machine, and I'm going to show you exactly how to start setting it up so that you can make your first stitches and you can get sewing now. This is an unboxing for the Brother LX3817A sewing machine. I got this at Walmart. It was the cheapest sewing machine at Walmart at about $78 when I bought it. So unboxing this sewing machine, you have the owner's manual. Then you are going to have a little accessories pack, also called sewing notions. And then you are going to have a few more things that are going to be located inside the base model after you take off the styrofoam. This specific model does come in 3 different colors. I chose blue, but there is a black and a white. That is the foot pedal that I was removing from the sewing machine. And then the needle area is going to be protected with some cardboard. So the needle is already going to be in the sewing machine, and there's already going to be a bobbin that is threaded that you are going to find on the sewing machine as well. So you do want to go ahead and remove all that packaging before you start. This is going to be the operation manual. It comes in English and Spanish, and then you also have a DVD that is included that can help give you some guidance. So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is to remove this cardboard underneath the needle. So just take that tape off, and then there is going to be a lever right here. Push that up, and then that will release that presser foot so you can easily take out the cardboard. And on mine, there is already some thread on the bobbin that you can see in there, but we'll get to that in a minute. Then go ahead and remove this paperwork as well. Then I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the sewing machine looks like, and then we'll get into some very specific parts. So let's go ahead and take a very quick tour of this Brother LX3817A that I got at Walmart. All right, so first of all, this is going to be where the power switch is. This is the master on off. This is where you are going to be plugging in this foot pedal and your electric. I'll cover that in just a minute. This is going to be a manual twist handle, and that is going to control the needle. Here you see all kinds of stitches. Don't be overwhelmed by that. We'll get to that in a minute. What you're looking at here is the lever that you touch to do some back stitching that will make your seam really strong. And that is something that you need if your project's going to have a lot of wear and tear. And then let's get up to here. So this is where you are going to put your spool of thread. This is going to be how you are going to get thread onto your bobbin. There are some diagrams that I highly suggest you keep on your sewing machine, because even experienced sewists tend to sometimes forget how to thread the sewing machine if you haven't been on for a while. This is where thread is going to come in, and that's where you're going to thread it for sewing as well as for putting thread on your bobbin. And then coming down here, this is going to be a tension setting. Then we're going to be coming into the needle area. This is the presser foot. Again, I'm going to explain a lot more of this in detail in just a minute. Then here, as you can see these lines, these are all guides for seam allowances. Can you see how they have some numbers on there for some fractions? You got a 5/8 and half, 3/8, 1 inch. These are all very common seam allowances, so you're going to be able to line your fabric up on that and sew a straight line and use that as a guide. You can see through here that this is going to be where the bobbin is. And then this is a compartment that you can see you slide over. There's no access in there, but you may be able to store some stuff. We're not going to really worry about that right now. Just wanted to point that out. This we've already covered. This is the presser foot lever. So when you push it up, you can see the presser foot goes up and down. Presser foot goes down. Bring that up right there. And then let's come around to the back. And not a whole lot that you need to know about back here. So let's get this sewing machine set up. So this is going to be your foot pedal. This is what you're going to put on the floor. Your foot is going to press down. This is going to control the speed. So you can go all the way down for really fast sewing or just slightly for slower. It does have a plug, and in order to get it working, you're going to need to put this into your sewing machine. And then you're going to plug it in, and there's going to be 2 cords, one that is going to go to the power source and then one that is going to go to the foot pedal. So this is what is in the accessories kit, and we'll go ahead and point some of these sewing notions out. So this is by far one of the most important things, I think. These are the bobbins. You can add different colored threads to each of these. Use one at a time, however you want to do, but those are pretty important. You can always buy extras of these as well. Then they also give you additional needles in addition to the one that is already on there. So be sure to keep these someplace where you can find them. I do have a good tutorial of how to change the needle on your sewing machine should you ever have to, and I'll link that in the description below. So these are the most important for beginner sewers. So these are nice to have, but don't get too stressed about these. This is going to be a zipper foot. This is going to be a button sewing foot. This is a buttonhole sewing guide. This is for darning, and this is a little screwdriver. So I would definitely keep all of these. Don't get rid of any of them, but I would not worry about having to use any of this stuff yet. And then you do have already installed on your sewing machine, this is called a zigzag foot. So that is already going to be installed, and then you already have that needle that is going to be on there as well. Now we're going to be threading the sewing machine, both the top and the bottom. So you are going to have a quick reference guide. You're going to want to start with the lower threading, which is the bobbin, and get that done before you do the upper threading, which is the top of the sewing machine. And then to remove that original bobbin, you just stick your finger in there and just pull it out. So now we're going to add thread to the bobbin. You do want to have your sewing machine plugged in at this point, but you do want it off right now. So go ahead and pull up this thread holder right there, and then we're going to put the spool of thread on the thread holder, and you want the thread to be coming in from this side, if that makes sense, not from the back. So you want it like pulling this way. So then you are going to come back over here, kind of loop your thread in there, and it needs to get underneath that spring, if you can see that. It's so tiny, it's having a hard time focusing. Just needs to get caught in there. Chances are it's going to if you're able to thread it into this groove. Then there are going to be instructions for how you can easily do this on the sewing machine, so you can reference that in the quick reference guide. You're going to take your thread around this way, kind of loop it underneath. Again, it takes a little bit longer when you're trying to do it one-handed and film it, but you do, you loop it underneath this little thing, go around this way. And yes, the direction is really important. You don't want to loop it the other way. There is a reason why it has to be looped in a certain way. Then we're going to be putting the thread on the bobbin. Now you want to thread the thread up underneath one of these holes, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So you simply take the thread that is attached to the sewing machine and you put it up through that little hole. This is what it's going to look like. Then you're going to line up the notches on this. Honestly, I just kind of do it. I think the notches are generally like where that hole is. You kind of line it up with that notch right there. I just do it until it fits, quite honestly, and you push it down. Be sure that there's a little bit of a tail on that thread so that you don't lose it. And you're just going to slide it over so it really does click. You are going to now hold on to a little piece of thread. Doesn't have to be this long, but hold on. And now you're going to be turning on the sewing machine. All right, you can always tell it's on when the light comes on, but so now it's on, and I am going to gently press on that foot pedal and get the sewing machine going. So as you can see, I only needed to hold on to it a little bit. I mean, it's always a good idea to just hold on to it the whole time and just continue to gently be winding that bobbin. You're gonna see it keeps getting bigger and bigger. You can kind of guide the thread as you'd like. As you can see, it's starting to get a little bit wider down here and not so much up there. So you can just kind of touch this thread and kind of guide it as to where it needs to be going. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm just kind of gently pushing it to fill up more of that space up there as I'm slowly doing the foot pedal. And now I can let it go again. And it's going to continue to go, like, depends on the sewing project that you are going to be using, whether or not you want to fill up this whole bobbin, whether or not it's going to be a thread color that you are likely to use a lot. But whenever you feel that the bobbin has been filled up enough, or if it's getting overly filled, this is going to really slow down. It's not going to allow you to keep threading it. So when you are done, just simply slide it over, and then you are going to cut that thread. So take the bobbin off, and now it's time to insert the bobbin. So you're going to want to just slide this panel back, and then you're going to want to drop this bobbin in there. Again, make sure that the sewing machine is off at this time. So now we're going to take this bobbin. The thread needs to be on the left-hand side. You do not want the thread coming in from the right-hand side. So thread is going to be tight over here, and just simply dropping it in. All right, so now you need to kind of loop it around. It is really hard to see because this is so tiny. Do you see that little gap right in there? Like right where this arrow is. That's where you want to grasp the thread and just kind of get it in that groove. As you can see, I didn't have to really try that hard. It looks like it's harder than it is, but you just want to get that thread right in there, and it's going to be right about where that arrow is. Then after that, bring it up here, feed it into this groove. Now, unless you want to cut the bobbin thread, which you can do by pulling it here and then pulling it to the right, and it'll cut it off, I would say just leave it here, and that is going to be for when you start sewing. Then you are going to put this faceplate back on, and it kind of clicks in, and now it's time to do the upper thread. All right, so from doing the bobbin, you have the thread that is up in this configuration. You just want to take that off of this little circular little thing there, and you're already halfway done with threading the sewing machine. You will then start on step number 2 and start doing this. I'm about to show you step by step what that looks like, but if you start with the bobbin, you can keep the spool right there, and you've already got it behind the spring. Now it is time to add the thread to the top of the sewing machine. So first of all, you want to be sure that this power cord is off. You do not want to be touching the needle and accidentally have it start moving. So power off. And then you want to be sure that your needle is in the upper position. So I will try to focus that there. Let's see, maybe that will work. So you can see you go down, and then this is going to be the upmost position. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but it needs to be pretty close to that upper position. And the way that I am doing that is simply by turning this. And if you notice, there is this sort of groove. In general, when that groove is on or towards the top of the sewing machine, as you can see now, is when that needle is going to be in one of its most upper positions. So I wouldn't use that exactly, because as you can see, it's not lined up right now, and needle is getting a little bit lower than it could be. That is the point right in there. So that is how you do it. So just be sure that that needle is all the way up. And then you also want your presser foot to be up. And again, if you push this lever down, that is making the presser foot go all the way down onto this plate. And then if you pull this up, that is when there's going to be some room underneath that presser foot, and that is what you want. So needle up, presser foot up. Then one more thing is to pull this thread holder up. All right, so I'm going to use an old spool of thread that I have in a color other than white, so that you can actually see what's going on. So you are going to put your spool of thread on there. If it's a brand new spool, you might have to poke a little hole in there and it'll easily slide on. And then you're going to take out your thread like this. Now there is some helpful guidance that is going to be on your sewing machine to help you through this. So in this right here, I'm trying to do this one-handed, you're going to put the thread through here, and then just make sure that it kind of gets underneath this spring. It's not hard. You're going to see, like, as you start pulling, if the thread goes everywhere, then it's not underneath the spring. So it's like you want it underneath the spring, but chances are it's going to happen. So then you take the thread and you kind of pull it down this way. As you can see, there's a number 2 right here showing you what to do. Then there is a number 3 right there, which means you're going to bring it underneath this tension. Then we are going to bring it up right here. As you can see, it says number 4. And in this part, I'm going to just leave that there for a minute so I can show you. There is this hook. And that moves as you move the needle, which is why you want the needle to be up there. And it's kind of like this thing where you just have to get it behind that hook. Again, it's a little bit harder to show on camera because you can't really see deep down in there, but you'll know if it's hooked. You just kind of loop it around that piece and then just gently tug on it. If it stays in there, it's good. If your thread comes all the way out, then obviously it hasn't hooked up in there and you just need to try again. And so then you're going to come back down this way. Again, there's that number 5, which is the next step. All right, so doing this two-handed, you can see that I hold this out here, kind of thread, oh, it already did it, thread that in the back, and it kind of catches. This is actually a little hard to see, so let me do that again. I'm going to hold the thread like this. I'm going to hold this out here. And then you just kind of slip it in between that and it just catches. And then just slightly tug on it and you know that it is secure in there. All right, go ahead and cut that off. Now is the time that you want to turn your sewing machine off. Okay, so once you have the thread that is looped up in between there, then you're going to want to thread the needle. There is all kinds of different ways that you can do this. I just try to get the thread in like that. I don't have any special tools that I use, although there certainly are things. So you want to, as you can see, the hole for the needle is like in the front, if that makes sense. So just kind of take your thread to the left-hand side, thread it through, and then that way, once you pull it a little tight, your cut end will be over here, and that once you have your needle threaded, you want to keep at least 2 inches off or of the thread. Don't cut it all the way to the needle, because what's going to happen is when the needle moves up and down, there's not going to be enough give in the thread, and the thread's just going to pop out of the needle, and you're going to have to go through all this over again. So be sure that you leave enough of a big tail. So your thread's going to be at the top right now. You want to put it underneath the presser foot, and you can do that by just maneuvering it through this open gap that is right there, and you want to pull it towards the back. This is going to prevent threads from getting caught up when you start sewing. You also have this bobbin thread that's going to there, and I would suggest just kind of angling that towards the back. Now what you are going to be doing is pulling your needle down, And you're going to be doing that with this hand crank right here. You're going to be pulling the needle down, and while you're doing that, catching the bobbin thread, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so gently hold on to this upper piece of thread, and at the same time, bring your needle down. And then you're going to see that it kind of catches the bobbin thread in there. You see, after having brought the needle down, that it kind of catches that bobbin thread under there and makes a loop. That is what you want in order to get that bobbin thread up so that you can start sewing. So then you just kind of want to get a pen or pencil, scissors, something under there in order to grab that loop out. So this is what I do. I'm just taking a pair of scissors, kind of grabbing that loop, pushing it out, and then we are going to have both pieces of thread moving towards the back. So you can see the bobbin thread is coming out of the back, and the top thread from the needle has been looped through this little part so that it is heading towards the back. And you're going to have those threads hanging off, and you do want to keep some amount of leeway and thread on the back as you start sewing. So now we are ready to start stitching. So you're probably going to be concerned about all of these stitch options that are right here. Honestly, you just need to pick one and don't worry about all of these fancy graphics. In the manual that you have, you are going to get guides for what each number is going to represent. And then, like, you can see straight stitch, center needle. It gives you like how big they are. This is straight stitch left needle. There's a lot of stuff in here. You don't have to understand all of this. You really just need a basic normal stitch, which is going to be one of these, like 6 through 11. Now, when I got mine, it's set on number 11, which is in a left needle position. So what I'm going to do, you can see that the needle is kind of off to the left over here rather than in the center of that plate. If you can't see it, that's fine. It's really nothing that you need to worry about. I want to switch mine to center and just something, I think I'm going to go with number 8. That looks like one that's not too tiny. In case I mess up, it's easier to get out big stitches. It's not too big like number 10 because that might not hold your seams as well as you want. So I'm going to just move this dial to a number 8. As I do this, and I'm going to turn it this way, you're going to hear the needle click. So let me zoom in on the needle, and I'm going to turn it. And you can see how that needle moved more towards the center. I'll turn it back to number 11. And you can see how that is on the left-hand side. Now I'll move it back to 10, which is a center position. And then you can see that that needle is right there. So it's on number 10 right now. You see that little knot right there and lining up over the number. I'm going to move it to number 8. And that is just going to give me a nice basic solid stitch. You can choose whatever you want, but that is what I suggest, one of these numbers for a beginner. Obviously, you have some zigzag stitches, which is going to be used for other types of things. Then you're going to get into these like really fancier stitches, which these are very specific project types and fabric types. I would not worry about that, and this video is not going to go into how to use every single stitch. This is just for how to get your sewing machine going. All right, so now that we have set the stitch, it is time to start sewing. So your sewing machine is probably off at this point. Go ahead and turn it on. When you do turn it on, there is going to be a light, and that is a good thing. That will help you start stitching. Then you are going to want to make sure that that presser foot is up. You do not want it in that down position. So if it is, just grab that little lever and make sure that it is up. And then for your first time, just start with some scrap fabric. Nothing too thick. You wouldn't want to do like denim. You don't want to do too fancy like a satin or anything slippery. So what I did is I had a pair of old pants that were stained. I just cut off a piece of the hem, and that way you're not wasting any fabric and making it more expensive than it needs to be. So for now, we're not going to be worrying about seam allowances or anything. You just want to get a hang of how to sew. Just put the fabric anywhere, honestly, anywhere under there, under the presser foot, if you can see that. And then I'm going to be using the handle over here and turning it counterclockwise, which is towards me. You always want to turn it towards you when getting the needle down. Then you're going to put that needle down and then bring that presser foot down with that lever. All right, so now we are ready to start stitching, and you are just going to start pressing down on that foot pedal, and I would suggest just a little bit at first, not too much, because the more that you press down on it, then the faster it's going to go. And as you can see, you're making your first stitch. All right, so continue practicing that. Obviously, we're not even trying to do straight lines at this point. All right, so let's say that we're done. Now you're going to want to take that handle and turn it counterclockwise towards you. Bring the needle all the way up in the top position. You're always going to want to do that so that you're ready to get your fabric out from underneath the presser foot. Then you are going to touch this presser foot lever, pull that up. You're going to want to pull out your fabric and leave a little bit of a thread, because you don't want the thread to be going back into the bobbin area. And like once you lose it, then you're going to either have to rethread the needle or rethread the bobbin. So it's always a good idea to leave a good generous amount before cutting. And then, let's see, cut off both things, and you are done. You have got your first stitch. Yay! All right, so let's try this again, and I will show you how to use that back stitching. Some people call it back tacking. So again, you want to have a decent amount of thread that is hanging off to the back with that presser foot up. I'm going to put in some fabric right here, holding this in the back. I'm going to take that presser foot lever and push it down, as you can see. Then I'm going to take the handle and I'm going to pull it towards me. Let's see. Yep. And this is why you do that. I wasn't even trying to have it. There wasn't enough of a thread hanging off. So you can see by the time that I pulled the lever towards me and the needle, this is all that remains of that little bit of thread hanging off. By the time I get that needle all the way down, the tension is going to pull this thread out of the needle. In this case, well, see, it's already pulled out. So I'm going to have to take this needle up. I'm going to pull it towards me again, and I'm going to have to rethread it. This is why it's just better to err on the side of it being too much thread. All right, so I got the needle rethreaded. Threading the needle is just a pain regardless of whether or not you're a beginner or experienced. It just is. So whatever you can do to not have to thread it as much, do that. So again, I'm going to have to release that pressure foot up again, because I need to get this thread underneath that groove and heading towards the back. I don't want it on top and heading back like that. I want it underneath the presser foot and heading towards the back. I'm going to then bring that presser foot back down. I'm going to use that handle and get that needle in. And then I'm going to start pressing down on the foot pedal to do the stitches. So I'm going to go forward just a little bit right now. All right. And then let's assume that I am doing a project where I want to do some back stitching. That is where you are going to hold this down while you are using the presser foot, and it's going to go backwards. It is a good idea to kind of guide that with your hands on the fabric. So you'll do like one hand here and then one hand guiding the fabric. I'll show you just right now what it looks like. Press it down and back. And then let me bring the camera back over here. And usually I just try to put my fingers like this and guide it. Push that little down, and you can see it's going backwards. All right, so we've back tacked. Now I want to just press the foot pedal down again, and now we're going to be going forward. And I will show you what that looks like. You can see that it's a little bit of a thicker kind of piece along that line. You see how it's thicker there, and then it goes into a little bit of a thinner stitch. This is where it has been back stitched, back tacked. That is going to really make that seam very strong. So again, I'll show you. This is just using the foot pedal and going forward. Then I'm going to hit that back button and it's going to go back. Then I let it go and it's going to go forward. All right, so I will show you what that looks like. Bringing that needle up all the way into the top position, bringing that presser foot up, pulling the fabric over here to the left-hand side. Make sure there's enough thread hanging off. I'm going to snip those ends. And so you're done stitching, and now this is what I'm going to show you. Now, I didn't really keep my hands on the fabric and guide it, so that's why it's a little haphazard right there, but that is where that back stitching is going to be. Then there is the normal stitching, and then there is that piece of back stitching. All right, so that was setting up the sewing machine to start your first sewing project. It is quick and easy. Once you get the hang of it, you're gonna find that it is way simpler than trying to explain each step and watch it at the same time. So don't worry about that. Now, I do want to encourage you to definitely save the box, save all of the paperwork and the accessories that come with your sewing machine. You never know when you're gonna need that. I find that keeping the box is great because if you end up having to move, a sewing machine has like all these little parts that you don't want to break off and you want to keep very protected, and trying to find a box later on that is going to fit this shape can be quite challenging. So just go ahead and keep that box. You can even store it in your closet, take out the styrofoam and just set your sewing machine in there for easy storage. So we will be doing even more beginner sewing tutorials coming up, so be sure to subscribe for that and follow along for beginner sewing projects.